In my lab, we study primarily the behavioral ecology of amphibians and fish. The endangered species we study is a large aquatic salamander called the hellbender, and it's, it has a face only a mother can love, but I think they're kind of cute. They are the largest salamander in North America, second largest in the world, so from that perspective, they're quite unique. Well, as far as endangered species work is concerned, we're primarily interested in conservation of the species because we know from some of our previous research that they are in quite a lot of trouble in the state of Missouri in particular, but also through a large part of their range. So we really want to know what the problem is and ideally how to fix the problem. So that's sort of the big picture of what we're trying to do. There is no one suspect as far as what the problem is. So the first issue is trying to determine what the problem is. And you can do that in a lab setting. You can do parts of it in the field. For example, the first part of the study, which we began in the late 1990s, was actually a long series of field censuses. So we went out to every river in Missouri that was supposed to contain hellbenders and census the area for hellbenders. And that's where we realized there was such a big problem because we found that in comparison to the samples from the 80s, the populations had decreased by about 75%. And that was true in all of the rivers. So that field study was really integral in letting us know just how serious the problem was. And from there, we went on to a series of studies. The first one involved looking at male reproductive health. And we looked at males because sampling female reproduction would be invasive. That is, we would have to actually kill them and look at their gonads and do sectioning. And of course, when you got a species that's in trouble, you don't want to kill them. Mm-hmm. Males, on the other hand, you can sample their reproductive output non-invasively, and so we did that. And that was also a combination of lab and field studies where we actually sampled the animals in the field and then returned them immediately to the place that they were collected. And then we looked at the sperm samples in the lab. There has been lots of speculation at this point and lots of looking at the habitat to see whether there are any primary indicators. Hellbenders, we know, require relatively clean, fast-flowing, cool water. So those are very restricted habitat requirements. And so we know, for example, that the water is more sedimented than it used to be, so it's not quite as clear. They have relatively high oxygen requirements, so when the water gets sedimented, they can't get as much oxygen. When the water gets warmer, they can't get as much oxygen. There's also potential problems with agricultural runoff. It could be pesticides, it could be high levels of fecal runoff, those kinds of things that could be influencing the water quality. And it may, of course, be a combination of things. There's also one of the things we've looked at in my lab is the potential problem of introduced species. And the introduced species that we're primarily concerned with are trout, because the fisher people around here may not realize that trout are actually non-native species. They are introduced, they're not native to the Ozarks, and so hellbenders have not had the opportunity to learn how to deal with trout species before, although they've coexisted for a long, long time with native predatory fishes. So they've have defenses against those native predators, but they may not have defenses against the trout, and that, in fact, is what we've seen in my laboratory studies. What we're doing right now is we are at the beginning stages of a collaboration with the St. Louis Zoo. I have a graduate student, Rachel Settle, who has done a little bit of internship work with the Hellbender project at the St. Louis Zoo, where they're doing captive rearing of young that are raised from eggs with the hope of eventual release of them into the wild. And so we are currently working with them to try to understand the reproductive behavior, because one of the most important things that's happened at the St. Louis Zoo is they've actually got breeding in captivity. And that's the first time that had happened. So we're going to be looking at some of that reproductive behavior and trying to understand it a little bit better. And they have a very nice conservation program at the St. Louis Zoo, and if people are interested, they should visit their website and look at it's called the Ron Gellner Center for Hellbender Research. In addition, I will say that people should be really concerned about hellbenders, well, from a couple of standpoints. One is because the Ozark subspecies, which is the federally endangered species, is unique to the Ozarks. It occurs nowhere else, and so that makes it just part of our Ozark culture, and so it should be something we want to conserve. But secondly, because they are sensitive to environmental pollutants, we need to realize that we use the same water that they do. And so if there's something in the water that's causing enough of a problem to drive hellbenders to extinction, maybe it's something that we need to be concerned about for our own health.